Hello, everyone. This is Doug Campbell-John. Welcome to this week's episode of Revenue Renegades. I'm your host, Doug Campbell-John, and this week I'm excited to welcome Amos Bar-Joseph, the CEO and founder of Swan, described as a lovable for GTM. Amos, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Doug. I'm excited.
So I've been following your posts. I love that you build out loud on LinkedIn. We'll dive into all that stuff, but let's start off by just tell everyone what Swan does and how the company, what was kind of the founding story of the company.
Yeah, definitely. So Swan is, like you mentioned, Doug, is like lovable for go-to-market. What does that mean? It's an AI go-to-market engineer, basically. It's an engineering resource that helps sales and marketing teams turn any go-to-market idea into an agentic workflow from prompt to pipeline in seconds, so they could scale revenue with intelligence, not with headcount. Basically, we're building Swan as an autonomous business, actually. So we're just three founders, getting close to 200 customers, and we're not focusing on valuation. That's not the North Star of the business. It's actually ARR per employee, because we believe that is the metric that actually signal that the business is truly AI native if you grow that. And we're kind of like three founders. We try to get to $10 million ARR per employee. That's like the focus of the company. And in terms of like founding story, quickly on that, because I'm sure that we're going to talk a lot about the autonomous business concept today. So this is not like my first rodeo. I've built and scaled two companies before based on the unicorn growth at all cost playbook, where you raise a fat seed before you get to product market fit, and then you get to 30 people before you get to your first $1 million in revenue, and then you try to brute force your way from there, hopping from a round to the next round. And once you kind of like you see it, your entire company is built on like a very sick foundation in a sense, and it's really hard to navigate the ship once it's already been built. And when I've started Swan, I actually said to myself, the startup playbook hasn't been rewritten for like almost 15 years. Eric Rice, the MVP lean startup, was written in like 2009, I think, something like that. And with this introduction of AI agents, basically, I feel like this is my time to actually reinvent the playbook of how to a business scale in the age of AI, right? And so what we're trying to do at Swan, and we're going to talk about it, is trying to create this new architecture of a business that could scale with intelligence, not with headcount.
So I love that model, and like it's crazy to think about, tens of millions, let alone tens of millions of revenue per employees. Tell me a little bit more about like the agents you build for Swan. What do they do? How you built them? How does that let you create a business at your scale with only three people?
Yeah, definitely. So, um, the common misconception that people think about, what would an autonomous business be, is that you have all these digital workers that are replacing human beings, and you could just hire them and they will do the work for you, and that's how you kind of like scale. And an autonomous business means that they're like AI employees at the company. But that's not the case. Not, at least not at Swan. Like one of our core design principles when we're trying to architect that scaling model is that we always look at a human being at the center of every AI implementation. And the autonomous business concept is not about automating ourselves away. It's actually a journey to discover the 100x version of each person on the team. That is why the focus is ARR per employee, not ARR per agent. And when you actually take that, from a practical standpoint, I'm a solo go-to-market organization, basically. And I handle everything, from demand gen to closing to CS. And, just, the last 30 days, I've added, 300K ARR single-handedly with no ad spend and no SDRs. But I don't really do it alone. I do it with an army of AI agent that is really designed around my strength and my weaknesses. So these are not like off the shelf AI SDRs that can, spam the entire market and at every single point of time. What we actually discovered is that, my passion is in storytelling, is in content, specifically on LinkedIn. That's how we got acquainted for the first time. And basically, what we realize is that we can build an AI agent motion around that LinkedIn game. And we didn't know in advance what will be these AI agents. What happened is, like every single solution in the history of humanity, there was a bottleneck. And we tried solving for that bottleneck. And instead of throwing bodies at that bottleneck, instead of trying to hire people to solve that bottleneck, we actually thought to ourselves, how can we solve it with intelligence? And um, I would love to walk, the audience through, what agents that led to in
Please
terms of. Let's do it, right? You're
do
ready.
it.
We're
Do
ready.
it.
We're ready
Yeah.
for that. That's
Learn.
great. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, um, when you think about it like that, it's built around me. So it's actually, we can think of it as kind of like a funnel of how do I work. And that funnel mimics, the way that I try to create demand for the company and then convert that demand and then try to, retain that demand eventually. And so the first agent actually is Shakespeare, and it helps me write LinkedIn posts. So the first bottleneck was that I need to do a lot of things, but I, have this, building in public motion on LinkedIn, and I tell the story of the autonomous business. And if you're not following, guys, you should. It's interesting. And that was the first bottleneck. I spent so much hours, so many hours on writing this content. So we built Shakespeare, but not so I can produce, low quality posts faster and of higher output. Shakespeare is an extension of my mind, actually. It is trained on all of my posts and all of the content pillars and all of the frameworks that I create. And the more content I create, the better it gets. And it acts as a pen pal more than, the person who write the post. I use it in a collaborative way to consistently generate posts that generate over 1 million impressions every month on LinkedIn. Okay, and super high quality. Then afterwards, what the next bottleneck is that I got over 15K reactions, interactions with these posts every single month. And so there's like so many traffic there, and what we're going to do with that, right? So we've built the observer, who can monitor these reactions, identify hot leads, qualify them, surface them in Slack for me, and enable me to reach out thoughtfully to these persons. And then if we go one step further in that funnel, Doug, one step below, we actually have the people who saw the posts and sent me a connection request because they want to
Mhm.
get connected. So I get 300 connection requests each day, right? That's a lot of connection requests to go through. And so we've built the connector, which is a very simple agent that actually drives the most revenue for the company. It goes over these connection requests, identify high intent leads that are qualified, and basically sends out like a conversation starter. So instead of going through the inbound connection requests, I just go through my inbox for the folks who replied already and started the conversation. And that flow continues to the people who went to the website. So we get over 15K monthly visitors to the website. So we have an agent that identifies the ones that didn't convert but showed intent on the website. I qualify them, surface them, and reaches out in a personalized way so I can continue the conversation from there. Then we have the gatekeeper that routes, request access. And then we have after that, an agent that preps me for the call. So I don't need to spend, a second of time of prepping and, actually prep me for this call specifically. And actually tell me that Doug serves on the board of directors for Music Will, an organization that is focused on social impact through music education. So we share that music passion, and maybe we're going to talk about that, Doug, later on. And also, you were the QuickTime pioneer at Apple. So you worked on Apple's QuickTime project. So not only the basic stuff, but I have an agent that really preps me to get like these nuggets that can really break the ice in these types of conversations when I get on these demos. So I don't need to spend a time on research and briefing, etc. And then there's another agent that follows up and make sure that I follows up with the action items, etc. You get the point. It's an entire funnel. Every layer unfolded a challenge. Every challenge unfolded a pattern. Every pattern created an agent eventually.
So tell me a little bit about how you divide the work between you and your two other co-founders, and then what are the agents that they have working for them?
Yeah. So, um, an autonomous business, we try to perfect scale, right? That's what we try to basically we're focused on. And Antoine Saint Exupéry, sorry for my French here and for being too philosophical, but he said that perfection, you don't get to perfection by getting to a point that you cannot add anything. You get to perfection only if you cannot subtract anything, right?
Right. Right.
And so we look at scale in the same way, basically, right? How can we get to a model where you cannot subtract anything else and you get with the core parts that really require for scale? And so an autonomous business is a flat organization. Okay. It has three functions. One is the revenue creator. That is me. Okay. The revenue creator is the person that is focused on creating sticky revenue growth. Okay, and it does that from end to end, like I just described. It replaces, five marketing departments, the SDRs, the AEs, CS, support, all of that are just, being compiled into the revenue creator. Then we have the product creator, okay, which is in charge of growing sticky product usage. And it is a product creator just from the sense that, my CTO doesn't work a lot with the code itself. It always works with an AI intermediate between it, right? So there's in the development world that went extremely fast. They don't spend a single second writing code. It's always with working with an AI, either with there's Copilot, auto completion, there's Cursor, which is doing amazing work. But then there's like so many other things that are pretty cool. So we have basically we use V0 over cell, which actually changes the entire prototyping process. So you start by looking at what will be the prototype that you look at instead of starting from a spec and a PRD, like a product required documentation, etc. You start with the end. And so the product creator is actually someone who's more closer, at that gap between product and R&D, can do both of them because it requires more like high level skills. It's less about writing the actual function. It's more about understanding the architecture and the product itself and the features, and it has much more autonomy. So it replaces, design and product and engineering and Q&A and DevOps. You get a product creator. Okay. That is Neve. And then the third function is the agent creator. And there lies the innovation, basically. The agent creator's role is to scale the product creator and the revenue creator with intelligence, not with headcount. So the agent creator is building the intelligence backbone of the company so that the company can scale more like software rather than a traditional organization. And so Ido, the third co-founder, is kind of like obsessed over building these internal AI agents for me as the revenue creator and for Neve. And these can be super simple. For example, Neve is getting so many alerts on Slack that from all of these logging and all of these errors that it gets. So either just build him an agent that can summarize all of the logs from the last time he just checked, so he can just talk with that agent instead of just looking at these errors, right? And so it's just everything is like customized to the challenges that the product creator has and the revenue creator has, so they can scale with intelligence, not with headcount. So this is the architecture that we're looking for when we're building an autonomous business.
So what do you use as a platform for building these agents?
So in the go-to-market area, we rely heavily on Swan because that's like the thesis is around simplifying to the process of building agentic workflows for the go-to-market organization. But on top of it, we also love using NA10 as well. It's an amazing platform for that. And beyond NA10, is there anything else? And of course, we use for more like when it requires a little bit more of an application, not just a workflow. So if there's more broader requirements like storing data in the process, or maybe like UI that you want to interact with that agent, things like that. So we use Retool for that. Retool is an internal app builder that they released, and building agents capabilities, and it's actually amazing. So it's more like when we require something that is more robust, something that is more looks like more like an app rather than a workflow.
Got it. Have you played around with tools like, LangChain or Crew AI or those kind of platforms?
So we are building the product on LangChain. Yes,
Okay.
definitely.
Yeah.
We're using their framework. We're using LangChain, Langsmith, and a lot of different tooling that comes with that. Yeah.
Nice, nice. I love the org structure because when you do boil it down to the basics, it's really building stuff and selling stuff, right? And you guys have kind of aligned around that, and then just someone who's internally building these systems. So, how much of these systems then, I guess, are things that you ultimately want to offer up as products to your customers versus things that you want to hold on to yourself as a competitive advantage?
Yeah. So we're not going to hold anything to ourselves as a competitive advantage, just because our go-to-market strategy is actually to build this movement of autonomous businesses. So we actually believe that the more businesses will become autonomous, the more they will need to rely on products like ours, and the more they will trust Swan as the go-to for becoming an autonomous business, because we were releasing all these things. And so I have a growing list of of all the AI agents that we build internally, and it's kind of like it's open source and people can access it. And I love sharing these things. But eventually, as we see Swan growing over time, so everything that is kind of like customer facing, prospect facing, in that sense, buyer facing, then Swan could really help with using AI to leverage it. We see Swan actually as the system of action. And I think that's an interesting discussion around what agents actually bring to the go to market space and to businesses by large, because I believe my perspective is that the agentic revolution is actually a revolution about customization. So if you look at SaaS, the previous software paradigm, basically. So if you look at SaaS, what happened is that SaaS built solutions for use cases. Okay. And so what happens was the abundance of, there's an app for this. It's kind of like if you ever heard that phrase, right? There's an app for this. What is this? It's a use case that is being solved, right? But what we're transitioning into is there's an app for you, basically, where AI agents are not building solutions for use cases, they're building solutions for your business specifically. And for years, Doug, you've been at Salesforce. What does that mean? For years, sales teams bent around their tech stack, and finally, finally, they deserve that their tech stack will bend around their go-to-market motion, around their DNA, right? And so that is the promise of the agentic revolution for the go-to-market space. It's not the promise of all-knowing AI that can drop leads from the sky. It's not about hyper personalization at scale. This is not what the agentic revolution is about. It is actually about being able to truly customize your tech stack so that it can move at the speed of thought, your
Mm.
thoughts specifically.
So yeah, I've heard this described as the flip from software as a service to service as software, and it's almost like thinking about what are these agents in service of, and it's the same mantra you had at coffee, which is in the past it's felt like you work for the CRM should work for you, right? And that's really what all of this should be, right? Yeah. Yeah. So let's switch gears and talk a little bit about LinkedIn, because you've been obviously very vocal about using LinkedIn as a platform to drive pipeline. How do you think about what you write in a way to break through the noise, and kind of what's your process?
Yeah. So I get this question a lot actually, and there are like two ways to look at it. Basically, one is like tactical, like I can give like tactical tips, and maybe we can get down to that, because there are some ways to drive more traffic, more eyeballs, more engagements, and proven systems. But I think most importantly is that you need to have a good story. Okay. Yeah, a strong POV. on the world. And without it, no matter how good your tactics are, you won't be able to consistently generate, demand and really kind of like rise above the noise, basically. And when I look at, creating a powerful story, if I try to kind of like reverse engineer, Swan's story, because it was born more like from something like an internal resentment to, the unicorn playbook, and was this natural attraction to this concept of AI agents and intelligence. And it was born out of something really, genuine. And I think that it's also important to identify, what your curiosity and your passion and, what do you think that makes you special, right? But when I try to reverse engineer that, um, I look at two core components that are kind of like, intertwined and got to go together. Um, when you try to create that, viral story. And these two components are a viral narrative and a viral narrator. And we're going to break these down right now. Okay. So a viral narrative, it's basically a powerful story that is challenging the challenger. So what does that mean, to challenge the challenger? It means that, social media and like information by large is moving so fast right now that to challenge the status quo isn't enough today. It's boring. Like, okay, traditional companies are actually, building with headcount solely. Okay, to challenge that, that's cool. But everyone is challenging that, right? What we did at Swan, we challenged the challenger. It means that we took the status quo of the challengers. Like, what is the agenda right now that is challenging the status quo? What is that? It's digital workers, AI employees. Everyone is talking about, how AI will replace ourselves, and this dialogue that is driven out of fear about, how digital SDRs, AI SDRs, for example, right? We don't believe in that, BS, basically. We don't think that the vision of, go to market is AI SDRs. At Swan, we try to reimagine this, the sales role from, the bottom up, so that it has human AI collaboration to it, because we believe that if you crack that, the potential is endless. You can discover that 100x version of yourself, right? And so what we're doing here, we're challenging the challenger. And the way that we're doing it is we try to spark positive emotions within our audience. So it's not a dialogue that is driven around, from fear. It's about hope. It's about optimism, right? Because the future that we tell, that we believe in, is a future where the human is in the center, not the AI, basically. It's a future where the human will prevail. And I think that it's super important, where you're trying to create that viral narrative, is basically to challenge the challenger, but in a way that will provoke positive emotions with your audience. But Dive, sorry to go for a long monologue here, but
No,
I'll
no, this is
complete
great. Keep going, please.
the second combo, because this doesn't worth anything. Sorry to disappoint you guys. It won't be worth anything if you don't connect it with a viral narrator. Okay, what does that mean? A viral narrator that closes the loop. You got to be the most well-positioned person on planet Earth to tell that viral narrative.
Now,
If you are not the most well-positioned person on planet Earth to tell that narrative, then no one will listen to you. So I can talk about why in e-commerce, I think that shopping will be driven mainly by conversational AI, for example. But why should people listen to me when I talk about conversational AI in e-commerce? I don't understand anything about e-commerce, right? So what we did at Swan, we said, look, this is the future of company scaling. This is the future of scaling go to market. We're going to prove it to you. We're going to build the most insane model that have been out there, and we're going to document it in public. And that positions us as in a very unique way to actually tell that story. So when I come on this podcast and I tell about these functions that we have in the autonomous business, you believe me because I'm at the forefront of that specific experiment, basically. So I think that you got to couple that viral narrative with a viral narrator.
so let me push back a little bit on one of those thoughts, because you talk about not replacing bodies, but in effect, you are with what you described in your agent piece. You're just saying you're not completely eliminating from the loop. So, you've probably said, "Hey, listen, in the past, there was maybe a virtual assistant that's looking at your inbox of your LinkedIn. You might have gotten a content writer or a content marketing person. There's certainly people that you are pulling out of that process. And AI SDRs happen to be a bad first implementation for the most part, where it's kind of a spam cannon. But effectively, in some ways, what you've built, right? And when I really peel apart the agents, you've got somebody who's looking, it's kind of an inbound SDR that's taking a look at stuff, that's doing those pieces, that's taking that stuff, and you just kind of built it in a different way. So I I I think that there are uh I don't think it's suddenly going to be like you're a CEO and everything else is an agent, right? I do think that there's other roles to play. But I do think that you are actually saying the same thing that a lot of other people are saying, which is headcount is going to shrink, right? You're going to be able to do more with these kind of 100x kind of levers. Fair?
No, but I
Okay.
love the pushback. I love the pushback because it kind of like brings out the best out of the autonomous business concept. So just from a mathematical perspective, okay, the average headcount will decrease significantly within a business, but the number of businesses and the total employment and the market will grow exponentially. Why? Because you don't need capital to scale a business, you need intelligence. And we're right now in the revolution of democratizing intelligence so that it will be commoditized and everyone on planet Earth will get access immediately to unlimited intelligence pretty soon. And so to build a business will be extremely simple. To build a software business, to build an AI agent business will be just like opening like a grocery store next door. It will be the same. It will be easier, actually. It will be just 100x easier than just building a regular business within your neighborhood or something like that, because everything is so accessible, and what you really need to master is that human AI collaboration so you can scale. So the promise of an autonomous business is not about eliminating jobs from the market. It's about reimagining them, like every tech revolution that came, like the computers and like automotive mobile and things like that. It's about reimagining the roles. So SDRs maybe won't exist in the future that I believe in, but there will be a lot sellers because there will be so much to sell, and that market, a large. But what interestingly will happen, Doug, if the autonomous business, or when the autonomous business kind of like vision comes to fruition, is that it will be a redistribution of wealth, because enterprises would not exist in a world where you can scale a lot with intelligence. So the world that I see actually is that there would not be any more like these huge corporations, specifically in the software industry at first, where there's like few people who are the major shareholders of a corporation that manages 40,000 people who contribute value to these shareholders. What you will get, instead of these 40,000 people working at a single corporation, you will get 40,000 almost businesses in that sense.
Yeah. So I hear you in the kind of uh, if you take a look across the entire ecosystem, across the population, kind of the net is there. And that's happened in every revolution from agricultural to industrial and all those pieces. And I'm like you, by the nature of the work that we do, we're optimists. So we say, listen, net positive. There'll be some bad stuff like any technical revolution, but overall, net positive. But I do think that there's some of those things that you described, like the role of SDR might go away, and there might be people going like, "Hey, listen, I've got to go figure out how to up level my skills or try something different." Fair enough. So it brings me to my next point, which is if you suddenly say it's so much easier to go build a software business, right? Let's talk about copycats, because you've also been very vocal about copycats. But in some ways, the original or some of the core premise of Swan seems to be also similar to other businesses. Like obviously our B2B was out there, and all of a sudden overnight there's 50 companies that are doing website visitor identification. So talk a little bit about the kind of differentiation in software, or is it just all go to market and brand?
Yeah, definitely. So let me just tie into that notion of the importance of the salesperson, right? So we said that the SDR role might be eliminated in the
Mhm.
future, right? But the seller, that's the most important piece. The marketeer, the seller, what we call the revenue creator, that's the most important piece. And it's actually, um, you know, the product creator and the revenue creator, maybe both of them are like the most crucial pieces in the puzzle, but they cannot go with one without one another, because in a world where software is commoditized, intelligence is commoditized, the winners will be the ones that will play the go-to-market games better than others, right? They will be able to rise above the noise. I believe that eventually no one will really care about the level of intelligence that your product provides, because the changes in it will be incremental in the way that, and we can see it already if you look at, Gemini and, ChatGPT. Okay. So these are both apps that rely on, different foundational models, and they're fighting with each other over, who's better. And the cool thing is that at every iteration, the user base doesn't really change. Okay, so it's not like, Gemini just released a model and it's like at top of the benchmark, and everyone from ChatGPT is just flocking away to Gemini. We got to use this because that will be like a 10x improvement. It's about brand, first of all. Okay,
Yep.
and brand is the most important thing when you're playing the AI application game, basically, and maybe all of the AI games at all. Um, and so that's one thing. And we were at a company that was extremely focused on building a powerful brand from day one. And we tried to fill this brand with actual value. So the fact that we're building this autonomous business movement in public, and we try to create like an army of autonomous businesses around us, we're not doing it by, paying a lot of money to, Google and Facebook on ads. We do it by really trying to be at the forefront and delivering, high quality, valuable content. Um, so I do think that is super important. And in the age of copycats, where everyone can just build the same thing that you can build basically in a very short amount of time, what will hold eventually is being the best brand in the space.
So just speaking of brands, tell us about why Swan.
Why Swan? So, Swan is a business that is built by autonomous business for autonomous businesses. So we really we try to position ourselves as people who fundamentally understand the transformation that these businesses want to go through. They come to Swan not because they're looking to leverage intent signals. They don't come to Swan because they have a specific challenge in the pipeline, basically, that they want to solve. What they want to do is scale revenue with intelligence, not with headcount. That's where they really want to go through. And in my conversations with customers, I can sometimes spend most of the conversation talking about, what does it mean to actually, grow revenue with intelligence or with headcount, without even speaking about the product itself. And at the end of the conversation, the user would say, you know what, I want to give it a try, just because they're buying into this transformation and they trust Swan, that we really are focused on building something that is aligned with the market, that is aligned with, not with all the market, with these SMBs actually that are trying to become more autonomous. So Swan is not for everyone, and for SMBs that want to become more autonomous, they trust Swan in a world where everyone is full of BS about what does it mean to build agents, what does it mean to build agentics. It's so hard to separate the noise from the signal, and Swan is the answer for that, basically.
So why the name Swan? Is there a story behind that?
Sorry, I didn't understand that was where you
No,
were
no,
heading
no,
with that.
no. That's
Definitely.
both are good questions and good answers. Yeah, yeah.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah. So Swan. So if you remember, like the story of Swan actually started from a strong resentment against the unicorn playbook,
Ooh,
right?
okay.
And Swan, if you're familiar with the fairy tale, Swan starts as an ugly duckling, basically, right? It doesn't have any flashy TechCrunch headlines, no big fundraising announcements. Sometimes salaries might start pretty, small. You work hard, very hard. You grind more maybe than, a startup that just raised 20 million before they had, a demo. And you kind of like evolve over time into this beautiful, elegant animal that is also aerodynamic, right? That
I
can,
love it.
move fast. And I think that is kind of like the story of an autonomous business, because at first it's not very attractive to build an autonomous business. And I think that's the reason why not a lot of people are not doing it, and they turn into this regular unicorn playbook. It's because it could be easier to get a lot of people to do the job instead of just trying to grind like the founding team. And I think that that's the story of the ugly duckling that turns into a swan eventually.
I love it. I love it. Um, so just for reality check, you guys are three contractors as well, or just three full-time employees, and that's it?
So we have contractors as well.
Mhm, mhm.
So we have we're working with Carthy and Jared from Audience House. They are helping us build the movement actually, so the strategy around it. So we have like thought partners in that sense that help us. But in terms of like execution itself, we don't have any contractors, just the three of us. Supporting almost to like 200 businesses. That's pretty hard.
Tell me about the customer support angle of that, because I talked to, Adam Robinson was on the show and he talked about like, using intercom and their fin agent and kind of one customer support person, but you're doing that as well as all of the revenue piece. How do you handle that?
What happened over time is like I kind of like identified how it should look like for us. So we didn't actually bought something off the shelf, and that's like a lot of our design philosophy is starting at beginning like ourselves and see if we need actually to go externally.
Mhm.
Um, and at first so Swan is a conversational interface, right? You talk with Swan. So what we actually the first thing that we introduce is the ability of Swan to answer questions within kind of like the product itself, right?
Got it.
So if you're in, you encounter the challenge, then Swan will be able maybe to answer that specific challenge. So it had like a knowledge base within Notion actually, and we had an NA10 workflow that goes into that Notion. So we had like an agent that can identify at the front end, like, is this user requesting something that requires like, knowledge from that Notion doc? And that's how we kind of like build it. It was super simple at the beginning. And then what happened is that, okay, that solved like 30% of the use cases. That was nice. Okay. But what happened is that we added another layer on top of it. So we said, okay, if Swan is already answering these questions, why not, if he doesn't know the answer, it could escalate it to the founders. So we can kind of like, chime in, right? And give our sense. And it will be easier instead of just user will go to somewhere else and email and we try to get that back and forth. It's just immediate there. Swan will give us all the content and Swan will help us with writing the answer. You can just write to Swan XYZ and Swan will understand the thread and will reply to that specific user immediately. So it's much easier, right? So that really helped, with the overload, right? And then what we realized is say, you know what? I'm actually answering that Q&A in the thread. Why not ask Swan to push that into that Notion database, right?
Right. Right.
And it was super simple. Just we just added Swan a tool to add like a Q&A row to that database, and I just could tell Swan, document my answer. Not every time I want to document the answer because sometimes like super specific to that customer, but I would just say, Swan, document that Q&A. It did that, and then what happened is that we kind of like accidentally discovered a self-learning support system, and not learning quote unquote BS like 99% of the companies can tell that it learns. It truly learns just because I tell it what to put in the knowledge base, and that's how it learns. And we only need to answer every question once, basically. So that's how we handle support. And right now, Swan handles like over 70% of these tickets autonomously, and we're gradually improving it.
And when it's escalating, are you getting a Slack notification, or how are you getting pulled into that? Right.
Yeah. So huge core pillar in our design philosophy around building an autonomous business is that agents lives in Slack. Okay, all the agents live in Slack basically. So we see Slack as like the agent engagement layer. It's a conversational interface. It has all the components that you need to interact with agents because it has buttons over the messages if you'd like to build them. You can use reactions. You can if you the agent can output something and you can reply to the thread and give it context on that specific message that it sent you, so you can go back and reply to that, etc. So Slack is amazing for interacting with agents, and so I have like one main channel which I have a lot of agents just pouring down there. I have other channels with other other agents as well, just depending on the context, etc. But that is how we work with these AI agents for every use case. And Swan actually lives within the Slack instance of our customers. So
Mhm.
Swan is a Slack app, basically.
So it's because I was at Salesforce when we bought Slack, and I think it's still underutilized and underappreciated in the context that you're talking about. Because I think that the original vision was, hey, listen, Slack has taught the world to not only message using a messaging interface to talk to people, but talk to applications. And I think the vision was the hope was, let's unify this giant Frankenstein mess of apps that Salesforce has bought underneath the messaging interface. And then lo and behold, not far afterwards, we suddenly get introduced to ChatGPT, which is like, oh, well, this is the interface for everything. And I'm still fascinated that Salesforce and Slack haven't put that together in that way and made that kind of a universal interface for everything. But yeah, we're huge Slack fans, here as well. And I love that it comes in that way. And so, is the entire experience for your customers then inside Slack, or is there a Swan interface as well?
So there is a dashboard when you go to Swan, but we kind of like from a product perspective, like another design. It's the same design principle, but we're like Slack first. Okay, so it's like it's dashboard second. So it means that we tried to put an emphasis on the Slack experience first, and then think, okay, if the user wants to go to the dashboard and take a look at it. So how would that look like? But we don't think of if the user wants to first go to the dashboard, then that will be kind of like we will handle that use case second, right?
Got it. Got it. So you talk openly about successes and failures, which I love, and you posted one recently about kind of what happens when your agent goes a little amok, right? Can you just share with everybody that story? Mhm.
Yeah, wow. It was a great story. So, I hopped on a demo call with a prospect and, chit chat at the beginning, like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, breaking the ice. And then he said, okay, you look cool, man. So, I've already kind of like onboarded to the observer agent. And, so like, how do we start? And I'm like, the observer agent, like that's internally, that's like the agent that I share on these playbooks, etc. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh, walk me through what happened, like what are you talking about? I said, yeah, so I went to Autonomous. So Autonomous is my digital clone, basically.
Right.
And it's supposed to help people better understand, what does it mean to build an autonomous business, and kind of like guide them a little bit through the top of the funnel process. And that prospect, interacted with Autonomous and asked it about the agents that we have, and specifically about the Observer. The Observer is the agent that actually, if you remember from earlier in the conversation, guys, it's the agent that monitors the LinkedIn posts that I have, the reactions that I have, and kind of like signals whenever there's like a hot lead interacting with a specific post. And so that prospect really wanted that agent and asked Autonomous if we can provide it. And Autonomous said, yeah, we have that agent. The prospect said, do you have like a managed version for that? And Autonomous said, yeah, of course we have. And then he said, cool. How do we start? And then the Autonomous said, I can onboard you right now if you'd like. And the prospect said, yeah, let's do it. And he showed me he like shared screen during the demo call. He like shared screen the entire conversation. So then Autonomous said, okay, so okay, what's your ICP? Like, what's a lot of like these qualification questions, etc. And the crazy thing is that at the end, like it's the process said, cool, let's go. What's missing? The agent said, and that's where it gets a little bit creepy. And actually, it's an important lesson learned here. The agents told them like billing, that's the only thing left. And the prospect actually shared their billing address and like billing email and things like that. And Autonomous said, cool, I will take care of it from now. The observer is in action, right? It's like you onboarded to the platform. You actually took care of billing.
Oh
So
my
I
god.
was shocked, and it started funny, and it ended a little bit, creepy and dangerous a bit. So it's a lesson about guardrails, basically, when you're building with AI agents, and it's something that we actually put a lot of attention to. It is just that when you look at up the funnel, you think less about the damage that it can do, but we
Yeah.
learned it the hard way. um and there are a lot of ways to put these guardrails in place, and it's not only from like a technical perspective. There's also like a philosophical aspect to it of how you actually put a guardrail. And it's more about we need to understand that these large language models, they are built to serve, to satisfy, basically. Okay. They have that tendency, this bias built into them. They really want to satisfy the request. And it's not like the AI was malicious and requested the billing. It's actually the complete opposite. The AI was so designed, so, yarning for satisfaction, that it tried to move the prospect in that process. And so we need to understand is that we need to control that bias. And instead of trying to tell the LLM to walk the user through that funnel, we actually need to be more precise in what is it that we want the LLM to do. What is it, the bias that we want to lead it to? So maybe we want to say the bias is to just give information about specific things. And if you actually change that minor adjustment to actually focus on the information aspect and not the process, like moving down the funnel, then the bias will go towards something completely different, and you will need to handle different hallucinations. It's not like that will not lead to anything else, but if that is what you're trying the AI to get to, then the bias will be completely different.
I think it was, I don't know if you follow Wait But Why, the newsletter, but there was a use case in that as well, where it was like somebody was just like, I'm producing some, an innocuous product for people, but this desire to please, like, where the goal state. And we've seen the same thing, frankly, with social networks, where if the goal state is to have you spend time on the network, it suddenly goes to this like very inflaming kind of opinions and dividing kind of thing. So I think it's the unintended consequences. I mean, we all have to be very cognizant of and careful with.
That's like an amazing example. I just want to double down on that, maybe just to close the loop, because social media is actually a great example. I didn't think about it in that way, because in social media we have AI that is optimized to, continue the engagement of the user. And so just to double down on what I said, we need to you're actually designing the same thing when you're actually building like this simple agent. You as the builder and this company, doesn't matter if it's like a tool that you're using or you're building it yourself. It's the same thing like trying to design the mechanism that Facebook have done within their social media. You need to think about what is it that the AI is trying to optimize for, and understand the bias that you're actually causing to the system in that sense. So
Yeah.
just thank you, Doug, for completing that. That was beautiful.
Yeah. So what's next for Swan? Where do you go from here?
Yeah. So we have two directions, a product direction and a go-to-market direction, right? So from a go-to-market direction, we want to build, the movement around the autonomous business. Eventually, what we envision is something that we call the collective intelligence of autonomous businesses. So it's a place where all of the autonomous businesses contribute, gated content to an AI that you can go to get answers on how to build an autonomous business. And so instead of going to ChatGPT or Perplexity or Gemini, they don't have access to that unique content that has actually been written by the best builders and operators out there. They would go to the autonomous business collective intelligence to get the answers they want. And so that's basically, the go-to-market vision that we have, and that we want to enable, eventually create for the world together. And from a product perspective, we believe that, it's like you said, like Salesforce and Slack, they want to be the interface. Maybe they had the opportunity to build the interface for all of your apps. So we believe that Swan within Slack would be the interface for all of your systems in the context of go to market.
Love it. Love it. So I know we're running up on time. Just a few more questions here for you. You personally, what do you like to do for fun outside work?
So my biggest obsession is surfing.
Nice.
Surfing waves. When you hop on that train, it's hard to get out. It's so addictive. There's something about sitting on a board, um, in the ocean and just floating. Actually, not even the feeling of catching a wave, which is so, a great dopamine rush. But I'm not talking about that dopamine rush. I'm actually talking about that meditative state that you sit on that board and you kind of like, you go up and down, kind of like the waves are kind of like floating you in some way, and you just get to like like a state of being that is so hard to get through if you're not meditating or like investing in all these types of activities. So surfing is just, my biggest passion, and I would say my number two, because my agent told me about, Doug, that you have shared something similar maybe in that sense. So I love playing the guitar. My wife is a singer. We just had a couple of days ago like a performance together in the neighborhood. So something small, but definitely a big passion of mine.
That's amazing. Um, yeah, it's such a key part of my life, and it's funny. When I draw the thread through all of the things that bring me joy outside of work, besides family, it's everything is connected to water in some ways, whether it's skiing, snowboarding, scuba diving, sailing, kite surfing, all of that stuff. So yeah,
100%.
my happy
I love it.
place. What is something that people would be surprised to know about you?
I don't have any background in tech. I don't know if that's interesting. So, like from a technical aspect, like I've never, you know, in I was pretty like technophobic, I would say, like prior to the AI revolution, and I think that's interesting because it speaks to the intuitive nature of this technology. So, I was very good at philosophy. I was very good at logic, maybe at math, but not from a technical standpoint. And then, came this natural language interface. And I said, wow, this is like my time to interact with machines. Finally, someone did the job for me. I could actually finally interact with that because I love language. I love communication. I love thinking. I love, the mathematics behind language. I love all these components. And so finally, it was my time to actually be that technical person that people can ask him questions about how does the AI works, what's happening here behind the scenes, and things like that.
That's very surprising. And then just finally, how can listeners stay in touch with you and help you on Swan's journey?
Yeah. So first of all, LinkedIn, that's where I live. So, and I try to answer like every single DM. It's either me or with the help of my AI agents, of course. So you just hope to skip through the connector when you send that invite. Would love to get you there. I have a newsletter called The Big Shift. Kind of like weekly, I try to share, the learnings of, the loss, the losses and wins of building an autonomous business, kind of the behind the scenes. So you can subscribe to that. Basically, maybe we'll drop a link somewhere, Doug. And finally, I have the Autonomous, which is my digital clone, which might, try to get you your billing information and charge you for things that doesn't exist. But yeah, you can interact with it if you'd like.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us, Amos.
Thank you, Doug. It was my pleasure.